Welcome to the Inside the Birds Fantasy Football Show with Andrew DiCecco. I'm Jeff Mosher, alongside InsideTheBirds.com staff writer and resident fantasy football expert, Andrew DiCecco, to give us a look at his pickups, fades, and plays for week 3 in fantasy football. This is a new show. Andrew will do this each week to help you, all you fantasy football owners out there, getting the best expertise. So, Andrew, I want to start this show by asking you about running back rankings after week 2. You'll see some of the names: Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook. That's normal. That's to be expected, having good starts. However, Alvin Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott, guys who went in the first 5 to 10 picks of most drafts, are being outscored right now by Cordarrelle Patterson. Is it time to panic on either Ezekiel Elliott or Alvin Kamara?
No, Jeff, I mean, it's very tough to overlook with their lack of production, but I mean, they've proven to be top tier running backs for a number of years. Cordarrelle Patterson, however, you bring up something interesting. He is a very viable option. I don't think it's a fluke. A lot of times the Atlanta Falcons game script this season is not going to be it's not going to be favorable, so they're going to be throwing the ball, and Mike Davis is not a player that really is adept at catching the football. Cordarrelle Patterson they really don't have much behind Mike Davis, so they really need to lean on Cordarrelle Patterson's receiving prowess to really pick up those yards. I think he's going to be a factor throughout the season. If he's out there on your waiver wire, I'd go get him.
Yeah, 5 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown to go along with another rushing touchdown against the Bucs in a week 2 loss. You figure Atlanta's going to be behind in a lot of games, and that Patterson, being a former wide receiver, a lot better of a pass target in the passing game for Atlanta than Mike Davis would be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think that those 2 games are just a blip on the radar. I do think that he is going to be a consistent piece of their offense. So from PPR formats, especially, I mean, go ahead and go get him if he's out there.
All right. Great advice right there. Let's go with your pickups for week 3. Who are you looking at?
Well, Jeff, Derek Carr he's leading the NFL with 817 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 93 pass attempts this season, has Darren Waller, has Brian Edwards, has Henry Ruggs, has an array of targets to throw the football to. I think the Las Vegas Raiders are going to be a force this season. Throughout the year, keeping him healthy is going to be key. He is dealing with a nagging injury this week, so that's something to monitor. But if he's out there, go ahead and get him. Another player that I like is Rondale Moore, the wide receiver from the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
When he was drafted to be a Tyreek Hill type of player in their offense. He's 4th on their depth chart behind AJ Green and Christian Kirk. Of course, DeAndre Hopkins is holding that wide receiver 1 mantle. But he's starting to factor into the offense. 13 targets, 182 yards, and a touchdown, 77-yard touchdown on Sunday, his first of his career. I think that's a sign of things to come, Jeff. I really do. And I think this is like a last call for him. If he's out there and you're trying to wait, look for a roster spot to keep him, I mean, he's not going to be around next week. I think that they're facing the Jaguars this week, which is a matchup that I love. So he's a perfect flex option this week, and I think his role is going to continue to grow. My third one, Jeff, is going to be Sterling Shepard from the New York Football Giants. I think that he's someone that is matchup proof because he might not be a red zone option, but he's going to be a consistent presence over the middle, especially in PPR formats. I believe he has 19 targets, 16 catches for 207 yards and a touchdown. I think that's going to be someone that's going to be a consistent presence in their offense throughout the year. So he's another player that if you're short on wide receiver depth, go ahead and get him.
And of course, the Giants are going to host the Falcons, who have not been good defensively. So there'll be an opportunities for Daniel Jones to throw the ball. It's amazing how the more things change with the Giants receiving core, the more they stay the same. Sterling Shepard, still the best target, drafted Darius Slayton, brought in Kenny Golladay, Kyle Rudolph, and Sterling Shepard, who has always been a reliable slot receiver, stays reliable in fantasy football. Let's talk about your plays for this week 3 matchups in the NFL. Who do you like as far as starting?
Well, I want to start with running back Naji Harris from the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have him in one of my leagues. I really think that, I mean, he's sort of underutilized the first 2 weeks, 13 carries each of the first 2 games, but he has had 6 catches, and I think his role is starting to grow. They're playing, how the AFC North is. There's going to be that ground and pound approach, I believe. I think Joe Mixon's going to get his as well. Naji Harris, I think, while the Steelers' offensive line is among the worst in the NFL, he has shown that he can be a confident pass catcher in their offense. I think his role, like I said, is going to continue to grow. Really like him this week. And then when I look at what the Browns secondary was sort of exposed by the Texans, I believe the combination of Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills, the quarterback. Mm-hmm. I believe they combined for 227 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, and the game was fairly competitive throughout. So what I would do is I would plug in Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney against this secondary. If Andy Dalton plays, which it doesn't seem likely, but especially if Justin Fields plays this week, I think that those two options they're going to give the Browns a lot of trouble. And I have Allen Robinson in one of my leagues. Darnell Mooney, of course, has been one of my top sleepers. Plug them in there and start them with confidence. And then you have to also have to look at Kyle Pitts. Obviously, if you drafted Kyle Pitts, you drafted him to be your top tight end. A tight end is sort of a wasteland in fantasy football. So, but his role is starting to grow. You saw him really struggle against the Philadelphia Eagles. He had 31 receiving yards. And then you saw him, I believe he had 73 yards on 5 catches against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is a much better defense, in my opinion. So he's starting to find his way. He's starting to get a little bit of chemistry there with Matt Ryan. I think he has the Giants this week, which was sort of, you had Noah Fant that found success in week 1. Logan Thomas in week 2, there were opportunities for him to really break the game wide open had it not been for Taylor Heineke playing quarterback. So I think that Kyle Pitts will be a great option this week as well. A bonus play will be Devontae Smith this week. I like Devontae Smith in a bounce back week. Hit both him and Jalen Hurts. I think they're going to redefine that connection this week. Obviously, he's going to be seeing a lot of Trayvon Diggs. The two players know each other fairly well from their time at Alabama. He's had 15 targets through 2 weeks. And I think you might see a stat line sort of similar to what you saw in week 1, where he had 71 yards and 1 touchdown. So that's a player that I would plug in there in your flex if you have him.
That's for those who have the patience to wait to put a player in their lineup who's going to play on Monday Night Football. Devontae Smith, Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver against that Dallas secondary. All right, let's finish it off with some players to avoid. Who's fading for week 3 in fantasy football, Andrew?
James Robinson, a player who I really liked last season throughout the whole draft process, really burst onto the scene out of nowhere, seemingly. But the volume is not there. He's had 16 carries for only 72 yards through 2 weeks. And I believe he's had 9 targets in the passing game. Their game script does not it's not going to be favorable the rest of the season. They're going to struggle. They're going to be utilizing DJ Chark and Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault and players like that. And the volume is just not there. Obviously, if you drafted James Robinson, you drafted him to be an RB2 or an RB3. The production's too volatile and too risky to throw him in there. So he's going to go to the bench if I had him on my roster, which in one of my leagues I do. Also have to look at Antonio Brown, the wide receiver, of course, from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Really burst on the scene with 121 yards, 1 touchdown in the opener. And you started to think that, the old AB is starting to, rear its head. Then he comes back to life a little bit and he has 3 targets, 1 catch, 17 yards in week 2. Burned a lot of owners this week, of course, but that's sort of the nature of the Buccaneers offense, Jeff. I mean, this week it was Mike Evans' opportunity. He had 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then I think what you're going to see is then there's also Chris Godwin. It could be his turn this week. You just don't know. There's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. He's not a player that's going to consistently see that enough volume to warrant being a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 every week. So I think you want to temper your expectations there. Also, Michael Pittman, the wide receiver from the Indianapolis Colts, really burst onto the scene with 8 catches for 123 yards on 12 targets. So again, do I think that's going to happen all season long? Absolutely not. And he's also going to be having another quarterback under center in Jacob Eason. They're playing the Titans, who are coming off that big win, and they like to control the clock with Derrick Henry. I don't know how many opportunities are going to be there with, especially with a backup quarterback. Obviously, you want to monitor that situation with Carson Wentz, but I don't know that he's going to. You sort of want to wait and see what the offense looks like with a new guy under center before you go ahead and throw him in there with confidence.
Awesome. So the arrow is up on Cordarrelle Patterson, on Rondale Moore, arrow down on James Robinson and perhaps Antonio Brown. You heard it from Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com. Our resident fantasy football expert will be doing this each week throughout the NFL season, as Andrew will bring you the finest wisdom in fantasy football. Thanks to all for watching. This has been the Inside the Birds Fantasy Football Show with Andrew DiCecco.